Hello again, everybody. This is Fred Krantz from St Onge, coming to you with another episode of Taking the Supply Chain Pulse. Our guest today is Tom Redding. Tom is the Managing Director of Healthcare Supply Chain for St Onge, and Tom has been with the company for quite a while. Wanted to get some insight from Tom on how he helped build the healthcare supply chain practice and get into the background of that and learn more about Tom and what Tom sees as the challenges and opportunities that the supply chain is going to face in the near and intermediate future. So, Tom, thanks for joining us today. Happy to have you here.
Oh, thanks, Fred. Appreciate it. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Oh, thanks. Why don't you tell us about yourself? Give us your background and how you got to St. Onge.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting story. Obviously, when I went to undergrad many years ago, I had this dream of designing, and I tell the story to everybody, by the way. I was going to design race cars, and that's kind of, I had this idea of what mechanical engineering was. And I learned pretty quickly that that's not really the case. You're not really designing cars, you're designing components of them and assembling them. So the actual design of those, just the way it goes, or with all the suppliers. So I graduated mechanical engineering and I've really done nothing with mechanical engineering pretty much in my career. It's all been around process and efficiency and workflow management. Worked for a number of companies, and I was working in California. I moved back to Pennsylvania, where I grew up, and my neighbor at the time actually was working. We're a 3PL with St. Onge, and I had told him that I was looking for another position, more of kind of a process engineer, industrial engineer kind of role, and introduced me to St. Onge. And I applied, and honestly, 2 weeks later, I was working at St. Onge, and at the time they had said, "Hey, we're just kind of standing up this healthcare practice." This was in 2007. I joined, just starting up the practice, and are you interested in healthcare? And I said, I have no idea what that means, but yeah, I'm all game for learning something new. So again, 17 years later, here I am, Fred. So a lot of change, a lot of growth in the company, a lot of growth in the healthcare team from 3 or 4 folks of us, in the healthcare team to north of 40, close to
Yeah,
45 people now.
yeah, we'll get into that a little later. I looked through your LinkedIn page and I saw that you graduated from Kettering University in Flint, Michigan, right?
Yeah,
Did you drink the water while you were there?
I did. Yeah, that's probably why I always kind of wink every once in a while. It's not because I'm winking at you. No, it was funny. I don't remember drinking the water when I was in Flint, but yeah, it's definitely a sad situation for sure.
Well, see, I got a similar excuse. I was in Camp Lejeune during the times that they were poisoning people with their water too. So
Oh, wow.
I know how you feel. The other thing is, I went through your bio and I didn't see. So I've heard you talk about the fact that you used to be on Baywatch, and it's not in any of the stuff here. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, so many years ago, I'm not sure if you heard of the show Baywatch, but I was one of the actors. I wasn't actually saving people, but I was in the show, and as many of you guys know, the show ended, and as all of us do in healthcare supply chain, we constantly pivot. So constantly pivoted again, and that's kind of where it is. I actually said that story recently at a conference, and somebody actually came up to me and said, I never realized that you were on Baywatch. And I said, yeah, me either. They're like, you weren't. I'm like, no. I was like, it was a joke. And they're like, oh, okay.
Oh, no wonder it wasn't there. I couldn't. I knew I'd heard you tell that story that you're there, and I
Well, the
just
thing
didn't
that's
find it.
fascinating, Fred, just for 2 seconds, is that I had said that many years ago when I was at HIMSS. I used that story. I was on a panel discussion, and it was fascinating because you see half the audience is laughing, the other half of the audience is looking up what Baywatch is.
Yeah,
It's
well, yeah, that's the problem. That you're a young guy still. You're going to find out when you get older, all the references that you used to use that everybody understood, they don't know a damn thing you're talking about when you mention things, like so you have to be careful
exactly.
with that. But when you did get involved in the healthcare practice, what was the first project you worked on?
Yeah, so I was working on a kind of a hospital expansion project for Duke. It was actually the Duke North tower that they built many years ago. And it was really kind of helping design the materials management spaces and all the kind of support service spaces. So for me, it was like obviously I'd been in a hospital in the emergency department or those types of things, but I'd never had any experience in that, and I was certainly willing to learn. And we had done a number of projects at that point. So I had some good guidance from Sean and others on the team to do that work. But it was kind of a neat experience, quite honestly, because I'd never been to a hospital behind the scenes. I'd never understood those types of things. But having the support and guidance, and kind of fast forward, kind of where we are today, it's pretty neat.
Yeah. And what did you learn there about healthcare that was different than what you had imagined you'd find?
Well, for me, even back then, I guess it was just the complete lack of automation. Everything was just very, very manual. The whole workflows were manual. I came from, prior to St Onge, I'd worked at a manufacturing company that used, vision and robotics. And to think about, what I was doing prior to St Onge, and then, working on that first project, it was just crazy to think like, wow, this thing is kind of very rudimentary. But again, I think, the industry is, 20 plus years behind, and certainly there's a lot of change that happened since then. But yeah, it was just very rudimentary, just kind of the basics and how things operate and function, back then.
Uh, did you have to sort of dumb down what you knew to get people to understand what you're trying to accomplish and do things that starting in a place behind where you would normally start if you had gone into a traditional supply chain operation?
Yeah, no, I mean, you definitely have to. I mean, I'm gonna say you have to take a step back. You just have to you have to think differently. It's just through a different lens that you're kind of looking at the world. And again, it's easy to apply what you did before and say, hey, this is what it should be. But in reality, it's like you want to move the needle, you want to move things forward. But again, you have to make sure that it's grounded based on, what's real and what's not real.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to use the term dumbed down in a bad way. It was sort of like Star Trek 4 when they went to save the whales and Scotty had to pick up the computer and he talked to the computer and nothing happened
Yeah.
and they said use the mouse and he picked up the mouse and he's trying to talk to the mouse. That's sort of like where healthcare was in relation to other supply chains. I guess you came in around, I did the math, somewhere around 2007, I guess would be when,
2007, I joined. Yeah.
yeah, and that's you know, that's relatively recently, and a lot of places were, far along with leading supply chain practices. And like you say, we were still largely manual at that time.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
about about St. Ange, our healthcare practice, I know since you've had a lot of input in building it, for the folks out there that don't know about it, our practice is divided into two sectors. We have architectural new builds or renovations, and then projects aimed at improving existing operations. Give us an idea of the difference between those two types of projects.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the big difference is, from a design build, or, designing a new facility, is that you have a kind of a, to a certain degree, blank canvas on, what could you do, what should you do, operationally, technology wise, system wise, just material flow wise. You can think about maybe how things should be done, and then design it from an ideal situation, where when we're in an operational mode, we're going into a health system. A lot of the physical plan is fixed. Again, we don't have the liberties to move walls. We don't have the liberties to widen the corridors. We don't have the option many times. So we really have to think creatively, like, how do you improve throughput? How do you improve, the reduced number of touches? All those things have to be considered as part of it. So I think from one is just kind of like a blank sheet of paper versus, yeah, you have constraints, and how do you kind of address those and still move the needle, with knowing that some of the things can't move, especially with walls and some of those physical things.
Hey, I think you probably have to get involved in a lot of education while you're going into either of these projects. Um, I know that the architectural side, probably architects uh, may just design X number of square feet for a function
Yeah.
without any idea of what things are required to be where and stuff like that. And by the same token, um, somebody that might decide all of a sudden, oh, we want to have an automated guided vehicle or something in our place. We're going to put that in. You have to go in and sort of educate folks on the requirements and lead them down the path to help them make the right decision. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's 100% right, Fred. I mean, I think if you think about where we are in a design project, it takes a few years to get through the design project. It takes a few years to construct a building. you could be designing something that opens in 6 or 7 years from now, and the technologies are changing. The building to be able to adapt to those changes have to be considered. So there's a lot of education of folks to say, this is what we're doing today. We want to try to incorporate into a new building or a new facility, but it's really taking kind of break down those barriers to say, listen, in 5 to 7 years from now, the world can be very different, from a technology standpoint, how AI is going to impact us, how robotics are going to impact us, all those things in the built environment you have to plan for. It doesn't just happen by, figuring out later. I mean, you have to plan for it. And
And
those are
and
things that require some education.
and how many of those new builds um, build in the opportunity for growth? I know that Dennis Mullins, when he was at Indiana University, I was out there when they were building their distribution center,
Mhm.
and they built, I don't know, I think it was like 300,000 square feet. What it may not have been that, but whatever it was, they were using about 25% of the space they were allotted when they opened up their initial operation, which gave them room to expand. Are
Oh,
most
yeah.
of the organizations we deal with that forward thinking enough to be able to do that?
Not always. I mean, I think it's probably a mix. It's probably a coin flip. The some are thinking about the expansion and how do we grow into the building we have, or be able to expand the building. I think there are some health systems a little more progressive, and they know that if you do it, if you think about it right now and you lay the groundwork, it'll make it way easier to adapt the building down the road, or expand, or if you think about a campus is getting bigger in the next 10 to 15 years, where you put the dock to support the growth of the campus is critically important. And if you're just putting everything at like, hey, I just have construction costs and I can just do it right now, this is going to solve my issue. Again, too many times there's like laser focused from a budget standpoint, but they're missing the entire long-term plan of a campus, or they're missing the long-term plan of the building and and again, how it has to adapt to support the business.
Yeah, and we've worked with a lot of organizations that are existing and that are taking that approach to try to play in the next 5, 10, 15 years. And I think, quite honestly, I think those are the exception rather than the rule. I think most of the regular small to mid-size IDNs are just sort of getting by day to day and don't have the luxury of being able to plan that far ahead. But at St. Onge, the thing that has struck me since I've been here uh, is that you build a strong healthcare team, and that team combines the skills of industrial engineers as well as people with healthcare operational backgrounds. So we have folks that, and we have the a third aspect, and that is the expertise of the folks that are on the non-healthcare side of the practice that we can always draw on as well. Um,
Mhm.
how does that combination of skill sets help us to bring more value to the customers?
Yeah, no, we definitely have come a long way as a company, especially as a healthcare practice. For many years, we really didn't talk to anybody. If you weren't an engineer, we really weren't interested in talking to you. And I think what we came to the conclusion, through, interacting with others as part of projects, is that, again, there is multiple mindsets. So the ability to think about not just this is how you would design it, like you, Fred, like you always say, a linear thinker. If you were a linear thinker, this is kind of how you would do it. I think there's also an aspect of it is like, how do you actually operationalize this thing? How do you actually get it up and running? How do you make sure that we have the right people that have been in the role of a director, have been in the role of, whatever um, operations role there is, and they've been they can see it from their perspective to say, hey, I've been on a design build, I've been involved in these types of projects. These are the areas that we've struggled once the building is opened, and how do we incorporate all those different perspectives? So I think we've kind of evolved past the industrial engineer. I think we've kind of, with an operations mindset, I think is definitely, we have more and more folks on the team that have that kind of direct experience. I think there's also another component to it, which is more of the analytical. So have the additional analytical rigor that we can bring to projects beyond just kind of the basic problem solving. So I think between those kind of three things, um, have been incredibly important for us to kind of, make sure that we're raising our game, we're being able to tackle problems, bigger problems, more complicated problems, and move the needle versus, again, you might have a very specific mindset. and we have to bring, different perspectives to the table. And we've done that, and we continue to do that.
Yeah, and we're bringing, my observation is for you folks that out there that would have no way of knowing this, we have a weekly healthcare team meeting, and in that team meeting, we exchange ideas and talk about projects and basically get input from all the folks that are in the practice. What are we, about 40 people in the practice right now? And
Yeah, we're about close to approaching 45. Yeah.
it's amazing to see the insights and the knowledge, and sometimes for the young kids, the naivete that they have about healthcare. I mean, I got almost 60 years, so you laugh at some of the things they say, but we have, once again, experienced operations folks there that do have the experience that help teach those guys, and it's a real unique chemistry that goes on among the group. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah. And
So
I think the big thing, Fred, we also, again, we have a number of, obviously we're an independent engineering firm and consulting firm, but I will say that, again, our ability to stay ahead of what technology and systems are going on, and what's being developed, what's coming out, what's working, what's not working. Again, I think that's incredibly important, as you shared, Fred, that information, sharing with the team, sharing what's changing, what the impact is to our work, or what's coming down the line. Is we have to stay ahead. I mean,
yeah, and those youngsters are just bright. So here's the thing with healthcare. When I came into the business, healthcare was acute care centric. The hospital was everything. In fact, there were very few what you would call systems. There were thousands of community hospitals. And in materials management, there was no supply chain. It was materials management. All you had to do was know enough how to back the truck up to the dock, pull the stuff off, and push it to the place where things need to get to so the patient can receive care. Well, now healthcare is transitioning from that acute care centric model to one in which the care is being pushed out to and including the home.
mm,
And, what pressures will that put on the supply chain?
yeah, I mean, I just did a recent podcast on this topic alone. I think this is a this is a topic, I think, where healthcare leaders, supply chain leaders, either they're staying behind, they're falling behind, or they're trying to get ahead, or just kind of hoping that they can retire before the supply chain really changes on them. But I think that the fact that you can look at a health system, and they might have 250 different locations, clinical locations in their network, that those requirements at each one of those facilities, the complexities, the number of items, the types of supplies, the variability that goes, it's getting harder and harder by the day. And if you layer in the going to the home, today we can buffer a lot of supplies. We can put a lot of supplies in supply rooms or in closets, whatever, within the hospital or these different ambulatory sites. But if you're going to the home, it's really about service, and it's really about making sure that you can predict the needs versus, hey, I'm going to send you an extra 2 or 3 boxes of this stuff just in case you need it. And the amount of waste would be tremendous. And if health systems don't think about the model as a service-based model versus today, it's a transactional based model, and it's like, hey, we're just getting the supplies in, we're getting them on the shelves, we're trying to do a good job managing. When you get into the home, it's a totally different animal. And if logistics and supply chain are not in sync with clinical care, it will directly impact, again, the ratings for the health systems. It'll direct impact the quality of care they're getting, all those things. And I said this at a conference last year, that you fast forward 10 years, supply chain logistics is going to be the number one driver of the delivery of care. And if equipment's showing up late, pharmaceuticals are showing up late, wearables are showing up late, or they're not synchronized, and that delays, patient care and making clinical decisions, like, game over. You know what I mean? Like, health systems are gonna, they're gonna move to somewhere else because I can get care from someone else. Someone else will show up to my house, or be able to get on a Teams meeting and Teams, online meeting, and to be able to have a conversation with a clinical team member. I mean, all those things can quickly kind of adjust and move and not have to deal with it.
Well, the interesting part about that is that historically, the healthcare supply chain has outsourced two of its most important components. They've outsourced purchasing and contracting, especially for commodity items, to the
Exactly.
GPOs. And they've outsourced logistics and distribution and transportation to the distributors and 3PLs. So
Yeah,
the
it's
the
tough.
real question is, A, what do folks need to learn, and B, are they going to be able to learn it fast enough to do the job successfully as the care goes out to the home? I would not. I am myself, for example, still can't get my head around how you can deliver medication to me via drone. I mean, when I'm worried about someone stealing the Amazon box off my front porch, how the hell am I going to know that my critical heart medication is going to be there and not take it? I mean, these are skill sets that have to be added that aren't currently present in many of the supply chains out there.
Yeah, I mean it's very real, Fred. Like I was just sharing with Janet from HPN on her podcast that um even if you fast forward and you think about the number of drones under 400 feet, and the FAA is put a lot of time and energy into it. But if you think about the coordination of drones moving to and from under 400 feet, and you have all these individual hospitals and businesses, and the sky is going there's going to be so many things that are moving, and the coordination of those activities is going to be extremely important. You could say today, like moving aircraft from Baltimore to San Diego requires a certain amount of coordination and effort and discussion. In the future, you're multiplying it by many times, and to be able to move things, you know either seamlessly to and from, and not deal with the traffic and the movement and potential implications of having drones flying, thousands and thousands of drones potentially down the line. It's a very real concern. And if health systems and leaders don't understand, that level of service, and you mentioned earlier about like the distributor network. I mean, I think today it's very fragmented. It's incredibly important to understand that, you look at the pharmaceuticals fragmented, DME's fragmented, you look at, medical surgical distributions fragmented. If you tried to think about it more holistically and said, okay, how do we integrate all these different distributors? It falls on the hands and the shoulders of the health systems, and they're going to have to figure it out. The large companies that are, Fortune 500 companies or Fortune 10 companies, they're going to stay in their silo unless something majorly changes. And I think the health systems are going to have to take it. They're going to have to think about how to integrate all those. And I would say most leaders are not ready for it. I think
Yeah,
that's a
and
fact.
so what you're saying, well, I get a picture of this. When I was a kid, I used to see things in the future where everyone had flying cars, and they were just like you described, all over a city. What's to keep
Hmm.
kids from slingshots in the summertime when they're bored, going outside and shooting down the stuff that's being delivered by the drones?
Yeah.
It's easier to accomplish the possibility of doing it than it is to implement the actuality of doing it, I believe.
Yeah. And do it at scale, and do it at such larger scale that it becomes available to anybody.
Yep. So when we go into places now, people are asking us, we all have our catchphrases that we don't really understand, and we use them in sentences anyway. People say, well, we want to incorporate AI and robotics into our operation. Wow. How do we go about that? So what do you see as AI and robotics being able to bring to the supply chain over the next 5 to 10 years, and how do you think we'll go about implementing that?
Yeah. So I think from a AI standpoint, I mean, obviously there's, I would call, more of the what I would call more predictive methods, if you want to call it that. But it's really about how do you get visibility of the demand signal, and how do you communicate that and proactively communicate that with the suppliers. And I think, breaking down those barriers between the health system, the provider, and those suppliers and manufacturers, I think is where AI can be that conduit. Because again, the AI, the whole thing around AI is like getting that visibility and movement, and doing it proactively to say, can I predict that my usage? Can I start to manage and send that information back to the manufacturers and distributors? I think you're going to find more and more where, the idea of, minimizing all the touches along the supply chain. Why have A, B, and C people doing certain things, and then it goes to the next person, then it goes to something else, and then it has to go to the distributor through EDI, and then it has to come back, and then but at some level, you'd have to say, well, AI can be that conduit to make those connections from the end-to-end supply chain and to be able to do it seamlessly versus all these manual processes that are happening today. Get to a point where it's like, I know what I need, and it's not somebody trying to figure it out. Nobody's going to a supplier to figure it out. I think when you try to tie that into some sort of robotics, I mean, robotics is an interesting one because theoretically, and again, I'm just talking, in general, ideally what could happen is, an order could be generated that I need for patient XYZ, and that could be sent to something, and a robot could pick everything for them, could put it into a tote, could put it into a box, could put it into whatever medium you want. It could be shipped to somebody via drone. It could get delivered, and it could be, from via robot delivered to wherever it needs to go in a hospital. So if you think about it in that context, like the ability to reduce all those touch points goes away. And by the way, I have visibility of where it is, when is it showing up. Like the reliability is key. I do at times. I think it's really cool stuff. I think the industry's changing, and there's a lot of potential out there. But I think at some level you have to say, do you go too far with it? Do you get to a certain point where it's like I forget, I was talking to somebody recently. It's like, I want AI to say I need pizza. I want AI to know that I need Chinese tonight. And I get home and the Chinese is sitting on the table because it showed up, it was on the plate, and the window opened up and the thing flew in, put it right on the table, and life is good. I come home, I got my Chinese. I didn't even know I needed Chinese. Like there is a point where it's like it can go a bit too far, and you become so reliant on it. But I do think there's ways and methods to kind of move the needle.
Yeah, I was talking, two guys I talked to. Randy Bradley talked about the idea of man-sheen, which is
Mm.
robots that cooperate with humans and to get tasks done. And today I was talking to Eric Fritsch from Mayo, and
Okay.
and they have a thing going on where they're checking out the possibility of robots assisting things being moved through the warehouse. They've done studies on how much human power. They said their guys are walking around 6 miles a day, and with the proper implementation of robots into the process, they could cut that down to 3 to 4 miles a day, and improve the quality of the output of the people as well as the machine. So uh,
Well,
doing things wisely, I think, is the key
oh, exactly.
to bringing the stuff on instead of just saying, "Oh, we got to have one of those," and not knowing what you're
Yeah,
going to do with it.
yeah, exactly. Like you say, it's like Jeopardy bingo, for purchasing. There's a point where it's like, yeah, I mean, what are you really trying to solve? And again, if there's labor shortages and everything else, it's like, how do you kind of mitigate that?
Yep. For you folks out there who've never heard me say this, as a supply chain leader, I've often found myself involved in what I would call Jeopardy purchasing. In the old days when the doctors had control of everything, they would tell you what they wanted, and then you had to ask the questions that would give them the answer that they wanted. And a lot of times that comes out with healthcare. They'll see something they want, whether it's right or not is completely aside from the point, and they don't check it out enough. And hopefully, one of the things that we help people do is make good decisions. So, Tom, what do you think the next great challenge for the supply chain is?
Yeah, so I think the next kind of evolution of supply chain is, it's not maybe it's an operational thing, but it's really about how does how does supply chain be involved as a key decision maker, or whether it is a seat at the table to help drive the strategy of the organization. I think there's so many things that are going on in a health system that's this the supply chain team is just simply handed on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, on a yearly basis. I think from where things are going and how supply chain can be an enabler. I think being at the strategy sessions and working through those things and making sure that if it's managing more of the contracts or it's being more service oriented, I think is going to be a requirement going forward. And being able to track performance and being able to provide that high level of service that's expected. Again, if I ordered something online and I had no visibility of when it was showing up, and by the way, I thought it was coming in a week and it showed up 3 weeks later, I'd be so frustrated. And again, if healthcare supply chain doesn't get beyond that current model, again, the systems are going to fail because again, they're getting further and further and further away from the health system. And again, if they can get ahead of it and start putting things in place and helping be part of that decision-making process, they'll be in a much better position. If they don't, I think many of the health system leaders, at least from a supply chain standpoint, will be left behind or they'll be forced to retire.
And the real challenge of that is, it's a terrible thing to say, and I'll say it so you don't have to. But the reason that most supply chain leaders are not in the C-suite is that they haven't demonstrated the capability of being there. And historically, that's been the nature of the leaders. Folks like me, I worked my way up from working as a nursing assistant. Now, however, we are getting people into supply chain with formal supply chain training and with formal healthcare supply chain training. And the quality of the people that are coming in is much better prepared than the folks like me that had to learn everything on our own along the way. I mean, we did the best we could with what we had, but I think that right now we're turning the young folks that are coming into the supply chain are really exciting to see and much better prepared than most of my cronies. That's for sure.
No, but again, I think there's so much potential for supply chain, whether it's somebody's getting some formal education, whether they're growing up in the ranks or taking on more responsibility or seeing where the future can go and helping drive it. I think the future is bright. I'll give it that. There's plenty of opportunity out there.
Yeah, and you've done a great job, Tom. I'm looking forward to see how we continue to grow the practice here. I think more and more people are becoming more and more aware that they have to do their homework before they do things in supply chain, and that's a really encouraging thing too. And with folks like you and the healthcare supply chain team that we have at St Onge, I think we can be a part of positive change for the industry along the way. So I just want to thank you for being on the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here. And we'll have you again sometime in the future.
Sounds good. Thanks, Fred. Always a pleasure.
Okay. Yep. Thank you, Tom. Have a good one.
You too. Take care.
Thanks again, everybody, for listening to our podcast, Taking the Supply Chain Pulse. Subscribe, follow, and give us your comments for topics or improvements. And if you know some people that you think we should be interviewing, please tell us about them too. I can be reached at fcrans, C-R-A-N-S, at St Onge, STONGE.com. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks again. See you next time.